Kan Bibiti Sangstavakacharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem se go Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Sham Kund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Shri Mayapur Navadip Dham Ki Jai. Gangamaya Jamunamaya Ki Jai. Shrimati Tulsi Devi Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Harinam Sankirtan Yagna Ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada's Transcendental Book Distribution Ki Jai. Samveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada. Reading from I'll Build You a Temple, and chapter entitled Facing Challenges. It was the first time I was leaving Bombay by my own choice. Though I had been encouraged and sanctioned by Srila Prabhupada, I felt hopeful about going to Africa and preaching and raising funds. But I also felt a little concerned about Bombay, especially since Tamal Krishna had also recently left. But Prabhupada had worked hard to strengthen the management and felt confident that somehow or other things would carry on. He suggested that in my absence, the other leaders should meet from time to time to discuss and solve the problems. And they agreed and met at least once a week. So I went to Nigeria, and in less than a month, I was able to collect 2 lakhs of rupees, which was enough to finish additional floors on the existing buildings. On June 8th, Manasvi wrote Srila Prabhupada. Today, by Lord Krishna's grace, we began the construction on the E building. In the morning, all the devotees assembled there, and some of the tenants also attended the ceremony. In the midst of the Maha Sankirtan, Mr. Shetty laid the first brick, and one municipal corporator broke a coconut, and people helped to put up the first window frame. Prasad was distributed to all the workers, and the people assembled there, and also to all the tenants. The roofs of the old buildings were flat, with little white ceramic chips set in cement. Prabhupada said that we should keep that flooring and build the walls and roof over it. We did not know anything about construction, or local conditions, or labor, or materials. Mr. Shetty was arranging almost everything. So that in the back there were A building, B building, C building, D building, E building, and F. 5 buildings were there. And they were ground plus 1. Ground plus 1. So the idea was that on the terrace, we would make 1 more floor, because there was no accommodation. Devotees were living in just chatai huts. And Mr. Sethi was in the construction business, So he took up that seva of making one extra floor on the 4 buildings, because the 5th building, the F building, was very small. The other buildings were, each flat was about 1,000 square feet, so the total area on the terrace was about 2,000 square feet. But on the F building, that was small. What Mr. Nair had done was, he made the 4 buildings. They all had, each flat was about 1,000 square feet. But the F building he made with the remaining materials that he had left, whatever he had left. So it became a smaller building. And thus, the devotees decided not to make a floor on that building. So the F building remained ground plus 1. And Prabhupada had a flat on the first floor of the F building. And there were 2 tenants on the ground floor. One was Anantaram and the other was Menon, Mr. Menon, a Malayali. Now, Mr. Menon was a very nice man. He loved to hear Srimad Bhagavatam, and he would come every day to listen to the Bhagavatam class, Mr. Menon. In fact, of all the tenants, he was the only one that was interested to hear. Now, after Prabhupada, he hurt his leg in a car accident in Mauritius, and it became difficult for him to go to the first floor in the F building. So they requested Mr. Menon to shift to the first floor, and then Srila Prabhupada would stay in his flat on the ground floor. And he agreed, he immediately agreed. Mr. Menon shift to the first floor, and then Srila Prabhupada started to stay in the ground floor. Later on, that ground floor office, it became an office. After the extra floors were made on the other buildings, and they talk about the work started on the E building, Prabhupada shifted to the D building. And so one side was his quarters, and one side was the Bhakti Vedanta Book Trust. And actually, he even considered his quarters the Bhakti Vedanta Book Trust. And Giriraj Swami explains how on Rama Ekadasi, Prabhupada had finished the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Rama Ekadasi, here in Hare Krishna land. So Giriraj Swami explains how he went that day and to meet Srila Prabhupada, and he wasn't awake because he had been up late finishing the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And he had written an acknowledgement of that fact, that on this day I finished the Chaitanya Charitamrita in the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust, which means that not only the flat next to his quarters he considered the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust, but if you read that concluding words of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, he also considered his own quarters to be the Bhakti Vedanta Book Trust. And yeah, that's a fact. In all of the rooms, there were these. In those days, I don't know if they still do, but they do they call it weatherproofing. Weatherproofing. So they would take bricks and break up the bricks, and they would call it a brick bat. Okay. Yeah. Right. Okay. So they would have a brick bat, and then they would mix that with cement. And then there would be a thin layer of cement on top of that. And then they would have these broken white ceramic tiles, and they would position them and then grout them all together. So in all of the rooms, on the A building, B building, C building, D building, the floors were this ceramic tiles, because that was what was there for the... And Prabhupada said that makes a nice flooring, so it kept that. And there are some photographs of, a nice photograph, Srila Prabhupada's taking his prasadam in the D building, where his quarters were, and sitting with him are Brahmananda and Bhagawan and some other devotees. And you can see the floor. It's these small ceramic tiles, you know. Yeah, here's the concluding words. Today, before, corresponding to the 10th of Kartik, Chaitanya era 488, the 11th day of the dark moon, the Rama Ekadasi, we have now finished the English translation of Sri Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, in accordance with the authorized order of His Divine Grace, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Goswami Maharaj, my beloved, eternal, spiritual master, guide, and friend. Although according to material vision, His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada passed away from this material world on the last day of December 1936, I still consider His Divine Grace to be always present with me by His Vani, His words. There are two ways of association, by Vani and by Vapu. Vani means words and Vapu means physical presence. Physical presence is sometimes appreciable and sometimes not, but Vani continues to exist eternally. Therefore, we must take advantage of the Vani, not the physical presence. The Bhagavad-gita, for example, is the Vani of Lord Krishna. Although Krishna was personally present 5,000 years ago and is no longer physically present from the materialistic point of view, the Bhagavad-gita continues. In this connection, we may call to memory the time when I was fortunate enough to meet His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada, sometime in the year 1922. Srila Prabhupada had come to Calcutta from Sridham Mayapur to start the missionary activities of the Gaudiya Mutt. He was sitting in a house at Ultadanga when, through the inducement of an intimate friend, the late Srimad Narendranath Malik, I had the opportunity to meet His Divine Grace for the first time. I do not remember the actual date of the meeting, but at that time I was one of the managers of Dr. Bosch's laboratory in Calcutta. I was a newly married young man addicted to Gandhi's movement and dressed in khadi. Fortunately, even at our first meeting, His Divine Grace advised me to preach the cult of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in English in the Western countries, because at that time I was a complete nationalist, a follower of Mahatma Gandhi's. I submitted to His Divine Grace that unless our country were freed from foreign subjugation, no one would hear the message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu seriously. Of course, we had some argument on this subject, but at last I was defeated and convinced that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's message is the only panacea for suffering humanity. I was also convinced the message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was then in the hands of a very expert devotee, and that surely the message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would spread all over the world. I could not, however, immediately take up his instructions to preach. but I took his words very seriously and was always thinking of how to execute his order, although I was quite unfit to do so. In this way, I passed my life as a householder until 1950, when I retired from family life as a vanaprastha. With no companion, I loitered here and there until 1958, when I took sannyas. Then I was completely ready to discharge the order of my spiritual master. Previously, in the year 1936, Puri, I wrote him a letter asking what I could do to serve him. In reply, he wrote me a letter dated 13th December 1936, ordered me in the same way to preach in English the cult of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as I had heard it from him. After he passed away, I started the fortnightly magazine Back to Godhead sometime in 1944 and tried to spread the cult of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu through this magazine. After I took sannyas, a well-wishing friend suggested that I write books instead of magazines. He said, magazines might be thrown away, but books remain perpetually. Then I attempted to write Srimad Bhagavatam. Before that, when I was a householder, I had written on Srimad Bhagavad-gita and had completed 1,100 pages. But somehow or other, the manuscript was stolen. In any case, when I had published Srimad Bhagavatam first canto in 3 volumes in India, I thought of going to the USA. By the mercy of His Divine Grace, I was able to come to New York on September 17, 1965. Since then, I have translated many books, including Srimad Bhagavatam, the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, a summary, and many others. In the meantime, I was induced to translate Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita and publish it in an elaborate version. In his leisure time, in later life, His Divine Grace, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, would simply read Chaitanya Charitamrita. It was his favorite book. He used to say that there would be a time when foreigners would learn the Bengali language to read the Chaitanya Charitamrita. The work on this translation began about 18 months ago. Now, by the grace of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and His Divine Grace, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, it is finished. In this connection, I have to thank my American disciples, especially Shriman Prajumna Das Adhikari, Shriman Nitai Das Adhikari, Shriman Jayadvaita Das Brahmachari, and many other boys and girls who are sincerely helping me in writing, editing, and publishing all these literatures. I think that His Divine Grace, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, is always seeing my activities and guiding me within my heart by His words. As it is said in Srimad Bhagavatam, Tene Brahma Hridaya Adhikavaye. In Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, first chapter, text 1. Spiritual inspiration comes from within the heart, wherein the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in His Paramatma feature, is always sitting with all His devotees and associates. It is to be admitted that whatever translation work I have done is through the inspiration of my spiritual master, because personally I am most insignificant and incompetent to do this materially impossible work. I do not think myself a very learned scholar, but I have full faith in the service of my spiritual master, His Divine Grace, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. If there's any credit to my activities of translating, it is all due to His Divine Grace. Certainly, if His Divine Grace were physically present at this time, it would have been a great occasion for jubilation. But even though He's not physically present, I am confident that He's very much pleased by this work of translation. He was very fond of seeing many books published to spread the Krishna consciousness movement. Therefore, our society, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, has been formed to execute the order of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and His Divine Grace Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. It is my wish that the devotees of Lord Chaitanya all over the world enjoy this translation, and I'm glad to express my gratitude to the learned men in the Western countries who are so pleased with my work that they are ordering in advance all my books that will be published in the future. On this occasion, therefore, I request my disciples who are determined to help me in this work to continue their cooperation fully, so that philosophers, scholars, and religionists, and people in general all over the world will benefit by reading our transcendental literatures, such as Srimad Bhagavatam and Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports to Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, dated November 10th, 1974, at the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust, Hare Krishna Land, Juhu, Bombay. Srila Prabhupada ki. I wrote to Prabhupada a few days later, after my return from Lagos. Here at Hare Krishna Land, the construction is going on the rooftops of the E and F blocks. The F block is already plastered on the inside, and today the plumbing and electrical work will begin. In addition, the tile floor has to be put in, and then the building will be ready for our habitation. Due to heavy rains, it's not possible to give a definite estimate of when the work will be finished, but 7 to 10 working days should be sufficient. The slab on the E block has been put up, and in 3 days, the wooden supports can be taken down. Then the process of plastering the walls and installing plumbing and electrical work and tile floors will follow, and that the building may be ready in 15 or 20 days of work. When the F block is ready for habitation, we shall vacate the hut and use the materials to build a go-down for cement and other construction items on the other foundation. The present but cannot be retained as the go-down because our master plan shows that area as guarded, and in order for the master plan to be passed, we must demolish the hut. As soon as the hut is demolished, the master plan will be approved, and once the master plan is approved, we will submit the complete proposal for the main project in Hare Krishna Land. Mr. Sethi is practically handling the construction himself and very anxious to demolish the hut so that the main plan can be passed and we can begin construction on the temple after monsoons. The additional floor on the E building was to become the Brahmachari ashram, and the additional floor on the F building was to become Srila Prabhupada's area with his personal quarters in one apartment and his staff quarters in the other. In the next month, the brahmacharis shifted to one of the new apartments, and the hut was nearly demolished. We have received an allotment of 30 tons of cement from South India, I wrote Prabhupada, and as soon as the cement is received by us, we can begin construction on the third rooftop. The plan was that when the second rooftop apartment was ready, the brahmacharis would move from the first rooftop to that one, and the grihastas would move into the first. On August 16th, Prabhupada wrote me, "I was very glad to learn that you had such a nice Janmashtami celebration, and that even our Mr. Sethi was dancing during the kirtan. Actually, it is due only to him that the plans for the resident quarters were approved by the municipality. Soon thereafter, we received a telegram from Brahmananda that Srila Prabhupada in Vrindavan had become very ill, so weak that he could not walk or stand. He had 104-degree fever and was diagnosed with malaria. Prabhupada had said that his illness had been caused by the sinful activities of his disciples, many of whom were not strictly following the rules and regulations. So we began 24-hour kirtan, and many people of the neighborhood joined. Some stayed until midnight, others came before Mangalartik. Prabhupada's presence in Juhu was touched and transformed the hearts of many of the local residents. One tenant, Mr. Menon, who had become a Vaishnava and was wearing tilak, he would sit at the floor of Prabhupada's Vyasasana and read, Lord Krishna fights with Banasura, from the Krishna book, about how Lord Krishna's Narayana Jwara weapon cooled down Lord Shiva's Shiva Jwara heat weapon, in the hope that in a similar way, Prabhupada's fever would be reduced. Mr. Chug, from down the road, had also came saying, Prabhupada's life on this earth is so precious that I would rather my life be taken so that he can remain to complete his work. Mr. Chug was a Punjabi fellow, and he would do a lot of services. Even at Janmashtami time, Mr. Chug would organize all the volunteer workers for Janmashtami. There was something called at that time, I don't know if they're still there, the Home Guards. Home Guards? Some kind of organization. I think it was RSS or something like that. Huh? South. Scouts. Acha. But anyway, there was a whole group of them, and they would come and they were like security guards and directed the traffic. And Mr. Chug, he would be in charge of all those volunteers that came for the Janmashtami celebration. And remember, he would sit up there by the front gate, and they had a sound system, and he would make announcements, for if we need guards here or we need people over there. And so Mr. Chug did that service. Plus, Mr. Chug was the accountant for the BBT. He was the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust accountant. And he did a lot of service. I remember at some point, Gopal Krishna Maharaj's mother was living down the street near that Cooper school, and she had a place there. And Mr. Chug used to bring prasadam for her. She was a very old lady at the time. Used to bring prasadam for her. So some of the dedicated devotees that were here in Hare Krishna land at the time. Brij Mohan Sethi told us that he had, who's that, Brij Mohan? Oh, here he is. Just happens to be here today. Brij Mohan Sethi told us that he had started 24-hour kirtan in his father's house and was praying that Prabhupada remain to see the completion of the Juhu temple. Then Prabhupada will be very happy, he said, and only then will my father and I be satisfied. I can remember this, I was a new devotee. I was in St. Louis at this time, and we got the news that Srila Prabhupada was sick, and all the temples were doing 24-hour kirtan. So there also, we did 24-hour kirtan. And when I first joined the temple, there were no deities. There was only a picture of the Panchatattva. And Prabhupada said, that's all you need for self-realization. If you chant and dance in front of a picture of the Panchatattva, that's all that's required for self-realization. And for that picture, we did all the artiks, all of the different offerings that you would do for regular deities, but it was just for a picture. And then this news came, so there was a 24-hour kirtan. Stayed up all night for about 5 days, what I remember. And at the end of that, then there was a scheduled installation of Gaur Nitai. Nitai Gaur Nataraj were going to be installed in St. Louis. But we didn't do it because Prabhupada was sick and we were all doing 24-hour kirtan. But at the end of that, 5 days or so, we got the message that Srila Prabhupada was much better. So at the end of the 5 days of 24-hour kirtan, we installed the deities Nitai Gaur Nataraj. So I always felt like the deities were preparing us. You know, Prabhupada being sick was just to get us to chant so that we would purify everything for the coming of Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda. And that they're still being worshipped in St. Louis after about 50 years. Dr. and Mrs. Singhal were collecting money door to door to put dhotis and kurtas on the devotees, to purchase dhotis and kurtas for the devotees. They too came, and Mrs. Singhal recounted how kind Srila Prabhupada had been to her in London, taking care of her in all respects. Friends and neighbors were constantly inquiring about Prabhupada's health and remembering his kindness upon them. On August 28, I wrote Prabhupada, I do not really know what to write on account of your health. However, I would like to invite your divine grace to come to Hare Krishna land as soon as you feel a little better, because the climate here is mild and atmosphere relaxing. Shankar Prabhu has covered the entire back corner near your quarters with fruit orchard, including banana, papaya, and guava trees. And we have built a little place where the cows can graze. So the view from your balcony may be very pleasing. Of course, Hare Krishna land is yours, and you are always free to come and go whenever you desire, but we just wanted your divine grace to know that we are eager to serve you here. On September 16th, I wrote, your new accommodation at Hare Krishna land are nearing completion, and as soon as they are ready, I shall inform you, I added. We understand that in order to spread the movement to the maximum number of people, we must have the most intelligent and expert organization. I'll read that again. We understand that in order to spread the movement to the maximum number of people, we must have the most intelligent and expert organization. We have vastly expanded our propaganda and organizational activities from the office in the Chand Society, and we very urgently require the large room in which the unmarried ladies are staying. Therefore, we request permission from your divine grace to move our belongings from your old flat on Hare Krishna land into the new block. Then the ladies can shift from the office to your old flat, and we can use the additional room for organization work in the office. Yes, Prabhupada replied, you can move my things into the new quarters. How long do you want to read? Keep reading? Okay. In September, Orient Longman Publishers approached me to contribute a chapter from Srila Prabhupada for a book entitled Gurus, Godmen, and Good People. The book, to be edited by Kushwant Singh, would have one chapter for each person, and the publishers wanted a devotee of each to write the chapter about his or her guru. I first sent my preliminary draft to Prabhupada, then wrote, if your divine grace has any suggestions or challenges or changes you would like to make in the chapter, or any particular message you would like included, you can inform me and I shall do the needful. Brahmananda replied on his behalf, regarding your letter dated September 27, 1974, Srila Prabhupada requests the following to be included in the article for the holy men of India. It should be very nicely written that so far as cultural contribution to the world is concerned, Srila Prabhupada stands first above all the other Indian holy men. Many have gone to the West and abroad, but no one has done what Srila Prabhupada has done. He has completely brought the Vedic culture to the West, and they are following completely. He has transplanted it. The simile of transplanting should be elaborate as we plant a Tulsi seedling, and then it becomes a full-grown plant. So Prabhupada has made this Vedic culture flourish all over the world without harming or changing anything. When transplanting, you have to be very careful with the seedling. If you harm it even slightly, it will not grow again. Similarly, Prabhupada has not superficially transplanted the Vedic culture. Please send the final draft. I hope this meets you in good health. Eventually, the book was published, and with my chapter about Prabhupada and a picture of his disciples singing and dancing on Harinam Sankirtan in central Bombay on the cover. In the meantime, Prabhupada continued looking for a GBC replacement for Tamal Krishna. I was now in India. He had written a Treya Rishi. So in my presence, another GBC may not be required, but if required in my absence, my question is whether it will be possible for you to take charge while keeping your occupation intact. As it turned out, a Treya Rishi did not come, so Prabhupada and Karandar and Jagadish, but neither lasted more than a few weeks. One person would come, and they would be here for a few weeks, and then they would go away. And that was Karandar, Jagadish, and Treya Rishi never even came. So Prabhupada was looking for someone who could replace Tamal Krishna Maharaj, because Tamal Krishna Maharaj had joined with Vishnu Jan Swami, his old friend, and they were organizing the SriSriRadhaRasbihariTemple traveling Sankirtan party. In those days, sannyasis would have traveling parties, right? Lokanath Swami's traveling party was called the Narada Muni Traveling Sankirtan Party. And Radha Damodar Traveling Sankirtan Party. Guru Kripa Maharaj and Yashodananda Maharaj had the Namhata Traveling Sankirtan Party. So they would have brahmacharis, they would have buses, they would have vans, and their party would do book distribution. Right? And this was standard for sannyasis. The sannyasis would take responsibility for training the brahmacharis in doing Sankirtan. Life in India was difficult, Shruti Kirti later remembered. When devotees from the rest came, they had no idea what to expect. They thought it was going to be like doing things in the West. Juhu was especially challenging. The battle went on for years. Devotees would come from the West to battle for the Juhu property, and before long, they were licking their wounds, devastated and wanting to leave India. Just being in India was difficult in the early 70s. Dealing with the problems in Bombay was impossible. I mean, even after the opening, this book goes up to the opening, but even after the opening, there were problems. And especially with the tenants, because after the temple opened, many people were coming and visiting the temple, and the tenants weren't cooperating. I can remember one time. Okay. Yeah, huh? Yeah. Okay, so the chief minister's coming in a few minutes. Yeah, so anyway, I'll just finish up. Sometimes the tenants would be upset because so many people were coming. And one time, one of our devotees, he had one of the Sankirtan buses parked in front of the tenant's house. So the tenant came and let all the air out of the tire of the bus because he didn't want him to park there. And there was a big fight, and so many things happened. So this book goes up to the opening of the temple, but you can do a whole nother book after the temple opened, what happened. So many things happened. So anyway, I'll end there. And now I think the chief minister is coming. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki, Itai Gaur Premanandi.